Growing up on a farm, time was measured in seasons, not seconds. When it was planting season, 9 to 5 on the clock no longer dictated when my dad would be working. I remember waking up in the early hours of the morning when it was still dark, getting ready for school, and my dad was already out in the barns preparing for the day. If there was a field that was ready to be planted, he was out planting it. If there was rain in the forecast, he was out even later, working to the early hours of the morning, racing against the coming precipitation. Harvest season was the same way. I remember one summer, our vacation plans were on hold. I was nervously pacing around the house, packing my bags, wondering if the wheat would be ready for harvest in time for us to go on our vacation. You see, the crop was too valuable for us not to be responsive to growth patterns that didn't line up with our clock and calendar. I think of this as organic time, a nonlinear ordering of time based solely on the growth of living things. Now, my dad's farm didn't operate on organic time because it was some 19th century throwback. Before Google, Dad's tractors were guided by GPS. Before the internet, he had a live satellite feed with real-time weather data and analysis. He had a team of advisors, local and national, formal and informal. He traveled all around the Midwest, to Texas, to California, even internationally, finding what was working in farming and how he could apply it to his farm. Yet with all this, he knew there were variables he could not control. It was organic time. There was another hallowed American enterprise based around the growth of living organisms that has not been as successful in navigating this passageway between advances in research and development and the existence of organic time. Educators, and more often education stakeholders, have failed to balance these tremendous advances in resource and technology and the reality of organic time. Let me break it down. To borrow from the educational lexicon, there is a common assessment for corn growing in Ohio: knee-high by the 4th of July. Now, this isn't just a little saying. I remember many first weeks of July, my sisters and I posing in front of cornfield after cornfield with my dad and grandpa taking pictures of the current state of the crops. These pictures, these assessments were important tools for my dad and grandpa. I think this is a good way for us to think about standardized testing. It's a snapshot describing growth at one very specific point in time. My grandpa had boxes and boxes of these crop pictures, but they weren't worth much by themselves. It was the planning and intervening that took place because of these pictures that made the farm successful. If the pictures didn't look good, that meant that there would be extra time put into thinking, how can we mitigate these problems that we're seeing? The crops were too valuable to write it off as a loss. Likewise, a pretty picture didn't guarantee a successful harvest. Our legacy as a society can't be pretty test scores. Because no matter what the pictures look like, they do not define the harvest. As adults, as parents, educators, stakeholders, we owe it to students to take this minute data point and put it in the broadest context possible to be able to maximize growth. Let me show you what that looked like in my life. In first grade, my teacher had an assignment where she would give us 6 words on a piece of paper. We would take those words home, we were supposed to study them, learn them, and then come in and read them for her the next day. Every afternoon, she would sit down at the iconic kidney-shaped reading table and call us up to read our words. If we weren't ready, if we didn't feel like it, we hadn't practiced, we could skip for that day. Because of my poor reading abilities and because of my preference to draw ships and planes instead of read to my teacher, I skipped almost every day. By the middle of the year, I looked at my classmate's paper, and I couldn't read any of the words that were on his sheet. He was on something like 117, and my paper was number 7. So if we put these up in a line graph, it looks like this. I'm over here at number 7, and he's over here at 117. This is linear ordering, and it actually happens all the time in education. And the problem with this is it becomes very easy to attach adjectives to the sides of this graph. 7 is bad, 117 is good. Matt, my classmate, is smart, and I am stupid. Things got worse before they got better. By second grade, the school had started to notice that my reading level was not where it should be. I told my mom, who was also a teacher. And over winter break, she had me reading through these sequenced progressive reading texts. And then she said something to me. I don't remember if it was directly to me or just in a way that she knew I would overhear, but she was talking about teeth and how sometimes after kids lose their baby teeth, it's easier for them to read. She said, I think when you lose your baby teeth, this reading thing is going to clear up pretty fast. Now, do you see what she did here? She changed the graph. She introduced the idea that there might be more to this than just Matt is smart and I am stupid. We now have this coordinate plane where my reading level is graphed against this teeth development. We could even think of this as a three-dimensional graph, where we have my physical development, my reading level, and my motivation and engagement, all working together to determine where my learning was at. If we had the math for it, if we had another model, it's really 6 or 7 variables, all parts of my personality, my interests, motivation, experiences, all working together to determine where my learning is at any one time. Now, my mom didn't get a pair of pliers and start pulling out my baby teeth. Well, like a good farmer, she didn't just wait for something to happen. She was having me go through those readers. She was prepping the soil, preparing the ground. She was waiting for that perfect sunny day after the rains. It seemed to have worked. By third grade, I had caught up with my peers, and I was even just starting to excel. Through my classmates' teasing, I earned a nickname I was secretly proud of: the leader of the nerd herd. I was really interested in science, and specifically inventing. Imagine number 7 on the graph is now thinking about being the next Thomas Edison or Louis Pasteur. One day I asked my mom, how do I become an inventor? She said, you invent things. I'm an inventor. I've invented lots of ways for kids to learn. You see, this comment that she made, it wasn't an accident. It was a reflection of the way she thought about me and all of her students. We didn't have the label for it, but her application of organic time meant that neither I nor any of her special education students would look at that graph and see ourselves as stupid. I did become an inventor. Not like Thomas Edison or Louis Pasteur, but like my mom. I teach music, and what it looks like in my classroom is it's a kid that barely speaks, has a lot of trouble interacting with his peers, but all of a sudden he's in front of the class singing a solo on a microphone with perfect pitch and expression, delighting his classmates. It's a middle school student with autism who literally spent the first 2 weeks of my class screaming because the class was overwhelming. But by the end of the course, she was writing and performing her own original music, not just for the class, but out in the community. This is why arts education is so important in the schools. It defies linear ordering. It demands an organic approach and organic timing. Imagine a music classroom with Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart and John Lennon. First, think about some of the non-organic responses that their work might garner. Wolfgang, this Don Giovanni opera, this is a masterpiece. This is destined to become a cornerstone of the Western canon. But I can only acknowledge it at 60% genius because you've missed deadline after deadline that I've set up for you to turn it in. John, these lyrics will influence and define rock and roll for generations. However, most of your work you've turned in as a group project. I can't give you any credit for this. How can I tell what work is yours and what work is Paul's? And these recordings that you do, By the third or fourth time, you really are onto something. I don't understand why you can't do your best work the first time. Why can't you try harder from the beginning? Why do I have to keep giving you all these retakes? It sounds ridiculous because we know that art is a process of inspiration and collaboration and iteration that does not follow a linear path. We have the notion of writer's block, which is a testament to this wild, unpredictable process of creating and learning. Even the sequential disciplines in math and science are the same way. Eureka moments are not scheduled in advance on a calendar. Learning is done by living organisms through a myriad of factors that make it impossible for us to conform it to a preset schedule. This plethora of factors also makes comparing lose meaning. Imagine trying to put Mozart and Lenin on some one-dimensional number line. It would take a multi-dimensional super rubric to compare them with any kind of meaning. And then, to what end? John McPhee is an esteemed writing professor at Stanford. In his manual for writers, he said, there is no real competition among writers. What appears to be competition is actually just jealousy and gossip. In learning, sometimes it's the same way. When we're comparing students or teachers or schools, we have to be really careful that we're producing something more than just jealousy and gossip. I don't think any occupation is truly free from jealousy and gossip. But farming in this state has a remarkable system for moving past these one-dimensional comparisons. The Ohio State University operates agricultural extension offices in every county in the state. These offices offer resources to farmers, allowing them to take this high-level research and apply it to their own unique growing environments. In his retirement, my dad has become involved with an organization taking this extension office idea concept to the African country of Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso has tremendous agricultural potential, and Kingdom Investment International is bringing microloans to farmers to allow them to apply this research to their own farms. Now, the emphasis here is microloans. While we would all like the agricultural landscape in Burkina Faso to change overnight, agricultural leaders know that the best approach is an incremental one. It's the same in education. People talk about disruption and what's going to be the thing that disrupts the education industry. I don't think it's going to work like that. There are fringe things that will become mainstream, but the greatest potential is in these small incremental steps, perfectly fitting these resources and technology to each unique growing environment. My dad and I had a talk a while ago about farming as an investment strategy. These were not his exact words, but the gist of it was, farming ain't sexy. It's not the instant millionaire, get rich quick, penny stock option kind of thing. It's incremental. Slow measured investments over time produce consistent and compounding dividends. It's the same way in education. I believe we are at a point to see unprecedented student growth. We need inventors. Parents, teachers, and students, like my mom, realize that each student is different and we can't put them on our calendar. But what we can do is take our resources, technology, prepare the ground, prep the soil, and wait for that perfect sunny day after the rains. We know that not every seed, soil, or season is ideal for success. When it comes to students, far too many have been planted in soil that is poisoned. Far too many have tried to grow year after year in drought. Far too many have been promising young saplings that have then been choked out by the weeds of generational trauma, poverty, racism, violence. But the crop is too valuable. We, the inventors, will invest the totality of our creativity and ingenuity into finding the incremental steps so that each student will become the successful adult we know they can be. Thank you.